that next question, very important question, is, well, if it giving us some evidence about the afterlife, what is that evidence? How sure are we about that evidence? And that's where my research really gets exciting.
The problem is it's all anecdotal, right? The problem is you can't actually study it. You can only get people's recount of a personal experience that they had.
Well, and the problem with doing near-death experience research is that if someone dies permanently and irreversible, Danny, they make horrible research subjects.
Yes.
They won't answer any dang questions at all. So you really have to go with what you have. And anecdotal implies a limited number of case reports. We're way off the scale on that. We have over 4,000. There's literally many, many thousands of more of near-death experiences that have been described by literally scores of other researchers. And it's a basic scientific principle that what is real is consistently observed. And we have that overwhelmingly in near-death experience, not only in my study group of 4,000, but as corroboration with the same things that people are observing in other research data sets. So I think given that the best we can do with near-death experience research, when you see that kind of consistency across many different researchers, among the young, among the old, among people with widely varying prior religious or cultural beliefs, even not believing an afterlife was possible, by the time you see that very consistent content of a near-death experience, how they change after the near-death experience, and how they consistently point to some conscious existence of life after death, I think you have to say you have to believe that based on evidence.
Yeah, I agree with you. I guess what I was getting at is all of these stories or people that you have submitted, the 4,000, I think you said, that have submitted their experiences, it's all subjective experience, right? None of it, it's impossible to have a secondhand account of somebody's near-death experience or corroborate somebody's near-death experience, right? I'm not to say that they're making it up. Like I totally believe it. And I don't think that you can rely on the scientific method for everything. I think, there's squishy science, right? There's obviously there's science out there that can't be measured and tested. That is absolutely real.
Well, let's actually, there is some line of evidence that indeed what is described in near-death experiences is likely that initial, or very probably, that initial sequence of events for those that die permanently and irreversibly. That line of evidence, which is yet another line of evidence for the reality of near-death experience, is called shared near-death experiences. We have about 20 people where there were 2 or more people that simultaneously had a life-threatening event. And they both had consciousness apart from the body. Most of the time in this series, they're able to see each other, communicate with each other, and often have dramatic discussions like, wow, there's our bodies down there, and here's our consciousness up above. So shared near-death experiences in my series of about 20 do exist. They're typical near-death experiences, but there's 2 people interacting that while their physical body is unconscious or clinically dead below. In my series, virtually all of the cases, one of them goes on to have permanent irreversible death, and the other person recovers. And when they get over that close brush with death, they can share with the world that shared near-death experience.
Whoa.
I was excited to start getting a series of those too. So, that is probably the most direct observation that is possible of people who are ultimately going to permanently, irreversibly die, sharing and interacting with another person with their consciousness apart from the physical body, existing non-physically, if you will. And one person goes on and is permanently, irreversibly dead. Very dramatic accounts.
How do these people, can you walk me through how they describe these accounts?
Sure. One example I share a lot would be a gentleman who was driving his fiancée. They were in Canada. He was driving along and he fell asleep. And so the car crashed. And then both him and his fiancée, their consciousness rose above the crashed car. And they were met by 4 beings. And they felt overwhelming sense of love and compassion. So when these 2 beings flanked each of them, out of the group of 4 beings, they separated. They actually went up above their car, their fiancés, holding hands. So the beings they encountered with their consciousness far above the car gently separated their hands, and they felt the gentleman who survived said he felt so much peace and so much love that he wanted to resist, but really didn't. And they could see off in the distance a landscape, an unearthly realm, if you will. Some call it a heavenly realm, but they saw that over there. And two of the beings took his fiancée and very gently started moving her toward that distant realm, which is, I know full well from near-death experiences, that unearthly afterlife realm. And the other two beings gently led him back down to the car. So when his consciousness, physical consciousness, recovered in the car, the front of the car was on fire, and his fiancée was leaning, and he instantly knew that that was, in his words, a shell, because she was dead, and he knew that instantly, and he'd left his fiancée with the other beings above.
Whoa. Are there any other accounts similar to this?
Yeah, we have quite a few.
That are very similar with two people at the same time?
Yeah, we've had, I mean, just to, pull another one out of the series I have, there was, I think this was another car crash, and there were several youthful people, and the cars were crashed, and there were two basically friends, and they were up sort consciousness. Again, in near-death experiences, it's by far most common when that initial part of the experience, when consciousness goes apart from the physical body, it's up over the body. So here were the two of them above the crashed car, and they were looking down on their physical bodies down below and dialoguing, and kind of their reaction was, I think we're dead, because they could see plain as day that their bodies weren't moving.
But they were talking to each other?
Yeah, they were communicating about the fact that those were their bodies, the two of them, down below the crash scene, and they appeared to be dead. And so they talked about that and had a dialogue, and then once again, the one of them went on and died permanent irreversible death, and when the other one recovered from what nearly killed them in the wreck, he was able once again to share those uncommon, but we have a small series now, a shared near-death experience. So,
are there any of these shared near-death experiences where both of them survived?
Now that's interesting. I haven't really found that, and I've looked. There was sort of a buzz about something that happened to a group of Arizona firefighters called the Hot Shots, but I haven't been able to corroborate that. And that was where two or more people survived and corroborated. But in the rest of the series we have, it's been one person, they were two people interacting. One went on permanent irreversible death, and then the other person survived. But we've had same thing. We've had building collapses, and we've had people, up above their body looking down, aware that they're down there and severely injured. But it's an absolutely fascinating study group of these shared near-death experiences.
You said, you mentioned something about on our break about blind people.
Yeah.
Are any of your studies on people that are blind?
Yeah. I'll start out with this is a single case report. Vicky was born totally blind. She was born prematurely, put in an oxygen tent, as they did, unfortunately, in the 1950s, and that literally burned out their retinas, the back of the eye, responsible for vision. So Vicky, basically totally blind. To her, vision is unknown and unknowable. And moreover, you cannot explain vision in terms of the remaining four physical bodily senses. I tried when I interviewed Vicky. No way. Vision is a unique sensory perception, totally outside of
there's no way to put it into words to make her understand it.
Absolutely. I tried, and others have tried. There's just no way. If you have someone that's totally blind, especially blind from birth, you can try it yourself. But anyway, bottom line is, with Vicky, vision unknown and unknowable. So she developed some other senses, which often blind people do. She was a very gifted singer. And so she professionally sang at bars and nightclubs. And so she was at a singing stint and was in a car on the way home. And I always say, because someone's going to ask, no, she wasn't driving. So we answered that one. But unfortunately, it was an inebriated patron that was driving her home. And so, they had a bad crash. And so the first time Vicky saw herself, she had her consciousness above her physical body in the emergency room and saw her body on the gurney. Her initial emotional reaction was she was horrified. She was frightened because vision was so outside of anything she ever knew. So she was literally terrified, and she had to calm herself down before she realized that body down there. She correlated the feel of her long hair, and interestingly, the feel of a ring that her father had given her, which she'd only know by the sense of touch. Now she could see it. And she said, aha, that's what I felt for all these years. No. And so only with that was she aware that she was having vision. And she went on to have a very detailed near-death experience, complete with highly detailed vision. And in fact, Vicky's vision is described as 360-degree vision. Many near-death experiencers described that, and she was simultaneously aware of visual
She's like a hammerhead shark.
She was like, yeah, right. She had, that's a good analogy.
I think they got 360 vision.
Well, okay. Wow. I still want to stay away from them. I'll stay out of that field of vision. But Vicky described, as so many others described, that she's simultaneously aware of vision in front of her, behind her, right, left, up, down. Technically, the proper phrase would be spherical vision. And because she was simultaneously aware of that. And so when I was interviewing with her, I tried to explain to Vicky that those of us here on our earthly life have, if you will, a pie-shaped vision because of the location of our eyes and the brain.
Right.
We're limited by the things we can see to sort of a pie-shaped, limited visual field.
Right.
So I told Vicky that, and she literally laughed at me because her entire life experience of vision was spherical, and it was impossible for Vicky to understand how we could have such limited pie-shaped vision. She just laughed, thought it was funny, couldn't accept it. But that's one example. We now have a small series of people that have been blind, including legally blind, and when they've had their near-death experiences, their vision is not only normal, but often supernormal. Just yet another example, Marta is an example I often share. She was a 5-year-old girl, literally drowned in a lake, got loose from her mother, immediately lost consciousness over her body, met a lady in white, and she went around the lake, and she was able to see, Marta's own words, details on telephone poles, birds' feathers, birds' eyes, details in people's backyards. She called it far greater than 20/20 vision. So she ultimately recovered. Now, that's mundane. Telephone poles, bird feathers. Now, to you and me and to everybody, I mean, like, is that interesting or exciting? Well, it is. It is if it's the first time in your life you've ever seen it, as it was with Marta, who was legally blind. So we have a whole series of these, of people that are blind, legally blind, and in every one of this small series, they have either normal or probably more often supernormal vision, like Marta, where they're able to see things, details often for the first time in their life, certainly far better than their vision would have allowed to them to have at that point in their life.
Wow.